For the last memo to Trump before Election Day, I want to talk about this outrageous comparison you keep making, Mr. President.
You know, we're the party of Abraham Lincoln. A lot of people don't know that. The great Abraham Lincoln, the man that I've always competed against.
Sorry, Mr. President. The only similarity between you and Abraham Lincoln is that you both have presided over unbelievably polarized times in American history. The key difference is that Mr. Lincoln ended on the side of the righteous, and you are on the side of the racist. Plus, they called the man Honest Abe, while you can't seem to get out a single sentence without loading it up with lies. But aside from Abraham Lincoln, I also want to shine a spotlight on your ongoing efforts not to live up to the great promise of democracy enshrined in our Constitution, but to live down to the worst examples set by some of the earlier occupants of the Oval Office. Because for all the lofty language and aspirational rhetoric found in our founding documents, Mr. President, the fact remains that some of your predecessors did not live up to them, and you aren't either. When the pundits opined that you should be more presidential, they were probably hoping you might ask your speechwriters to incorporate some quotes from our third president, Thomas Jefferson, on the topics of liberty and equality. Instead, you and your ghoulish advisors decided to copy Jefferson's most shameful legacy, just as he used the threat of family separation to force labor from those he enslaved. So too did you and your advisor, Stephen Miller, rip refugee children away from their mothers and fathers for your own political gain. And now you've orphaned over 500 children in the service of your own cruelty. And when you infamously called Haiti and African nations, quote, S-hole countries, you perhaps would have earned a bully from our nation's 26th president, Teddy Roosevelt, as he, like you, Mr. President, held some horrifically racist views about black people in general and Haiti in particular. But we all know that Andrew Jackson has been your predecessor of choice, a man who signed the Indian Removal Act, oversaw the genocidal Trail of Tears, and held Native Americans in camps by the thousands as he awaited forced removal. It seems obvious that Jackson has served as your inspiration, as you have herded asylum seekers and refugees in interminable detention, deporting them by the thousands and enacting untold cruelty under undignified and damaging conditions, as described by the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights. And while most other presidents who have committed atrocities also achieved amazing things, Jefferson, for instance, penned the Declaration of Independence, and Roosevelt established the system of national parks, your presidency is nothing but a tall pile of evil and racism dressed up in a MAGA hat. You have spent your entire life puffing yourself up in an attempt to convince the world that you're the biggest, the best, the toughest. Unfortunately for you, Mr. President, all of those have turned out to be the shallow lies of a lifelong loser. And you know you're losing. Your last chance is to suppress as many votes as possible, because you know that the majority, the vast majority of Americans have rejected you. But your dirty dealing isn't going to work. When all the votes are counted, as the American people will demand they must, you'll have no choice but to slink back to where you belong. A footnote in history, a presidency only worthy of being remembered as a warning sign for future Americans about how can and what can happen when we take our democracy for granted and elect the flaming racist beacon of our worst impulses to the highest office in the land. We'll be right back.